Welcome back. We are talking about addiction. This is our third podcast in our series of addiction. Today, we're going to be talking about eating for the recovering brain, how to put the brain in a healing state if you are a recovering addict, or if you're a therapist who deals with recovering addicts. This was actually requested by a therapist on my Facebook page. So thank you to that therapist. We are dedicating this to you because we listened. She listens to our podcast. So if you have topics that you want to have covered, please write to us. And if they fit in with what we do on this podcast, we would love to be able to help you out. Anyways, let's talk about the recovering brain.
So food and pleasure centers, because one of your best gifts, you have many, is taking super healthy, reparative food, medicine quality food, and make it taste awesome.
So here's what I like about this. Number one, we're talking about food to heal the recovering brain, right? But it's not really significantly different than what we talk about for like what we do in our clinics in the Brain Warriors Way. In your new book, Memory Rescue, we still use the cookbook, the Brain Warriors Way cookbook, and our website, Brain Fit Life. The recipes are on there. So the recipes are the same. Why? Because what's good for your brain to heal the brain is good for the rest of your body. It's going to put it in a healing state. So this is not too difficult.
But then why? Because you and I both worked at the Salvation Army's drug treatment program.
Because they don't know.
No. So why, when you're trying to help someone recover from an addiction, do you give them orange juice, bagels, pancakes?
2 reasons.
Sugar cereals, pasta, dessert? Why would you put the brain that is already damaged into a toxic food environment?
So 2 reasons. Some people don't know, and most of the leaders are addicts. That's the truth. They are food addicts.
So they're really hurting their own mission.
Yes. So when
getting people to change their food, oh my God, that's so
even
hard.
Harder than getting people to admit that they need to get off substances. So because food is pervasive, it's an everyday thing you can't get away from. But here's the thing. Sugar and processed foods. So when sugar is combined with like trans fats and salt, and it's in certain combinations, and especially in the processed form, it pushes on the same part of the brain as heroin and cocaine, that nucleus accumbens.
So sugar and
only it's 8 times more effective because sugar it's highly addictive, right? So it's really, and it's these small little pushes.
So, but don't you think it's just a little nuts that they're feeding addicts addictive food?
Well, and when
it damages their ability to get well because it's wearing out their pleasure
and
center.
It keeps them constantly. So the part of their brain that triggered their addiction is constantly being triggered. So all they need is to be a little too tired, a little too hungry, a little too lonely, and if that part of that pleasure center is being triggered, they're going to be thinking about addiction.
So you just started with the acronym to help prevent relapse,
right?
Which is HALT,
right?
And we call it HALT Plus. But don't get too hungry, because low blood sugar levels are associated with lower blood flow to the brain, which means more bad decisions. Don't get too angry. We've actually done studies of people focusing on what they love about their life versus what they hate about their life. And when you focus on positive things, your brain works better. If you focus on negative things, it's hard to learn and it's hard to make good decisions. Mm-hmm. Don't get too lonely. So HAL, lonely, because when we're disconnected from people who care about us and that we care about, it actually has a negative impact on the brain. Did you know that loneliness is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease?
Yeah.
And don't get too tired. If you don't sleep, you have lower overall blood flow to your brain, which means more bad decisions. And
car accidents are more pervasive.
One of our famous young patients, his blood sugar was dangerously low, and that's often when he might make bad decisions.
And one of our very famous patients, did you say our physicians or patients?
Patients.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about the same person. But they didn't realize how low his blood sugar was, and he was getting himself into a lot of trouble.
And so when people do bad things, rather than judge, go, why? And if you can be curious and not furious, you just can be so much more effective.
So one thing I want to point out, since you brought up the treatment center that we put our program into, the results when we finally explained to them why it was so important to change the food and really educate the people just took it in. I mean, the people that were recovering took this information and they understood it. They were excited because these people wanted to get well. They understood it. It was harder getting the leaders on board because that was a harder thing to do. But these people who were recovering really understood it, and our results were off the charts. It was unbelievable how well they understood.
So talk about, what did you have them eat?
Okay.
So they went from white bread, sugar, pasta,
now we had to do this we still had to do it on a rock bottom budget. So I'm going to be honest. I mean, we're not doing this like 100% with all 100% perfect ingredients. And we still made it work. Okay. So even doing it about 80 to 90%, we made this work amazingly well. We cut out the worst things first. Okay. That's all. We always start with cutting out the worst things first. So we cut out white sugar. I mean, we just got rid of the white sugar. And then we started next with things like the white bread and the like white potatoes. So we switched those things. So we did things like added stevia. Okay. We added brown rice instead of white rice. We switched. Now, I would rather you get rid of bread, but they added some wheat bread when they could. They did gluten-free things. Because in a perfect world, we would have you get off of all grains for a while. We couldn't quite do that there, but they limited grains. They started doing like lettuce wraps. They started doing sweet potatoes instead of white potatoes. So we switched some of the most toxic things first, right? And this was without getting rid of dairy. We would have you take dairy out for a month and then sort of add it back in and see some people will tolerate it fine and others not as well, right? So we didn't do that. We were not able to do the dairy, and we still had these amazing results because what we did.
So we increased the vegetables. We increased the healthy protein.
70-30. 70% plant-based foods and 30% high-quality protein. And we cut out as many of the refined carbohydrates as possible.
Right. So low glycemic, high fiber foods were the center of this healthy protein.
And we went to things like steel cut oatmeal instead of Frosted Flakes. And do you see what I'm saying? So it wasn't 100%, but it was way better than what they started with.
And what were some of the results?
Oh my gosh. So I'm going to use Thomas. Thomas was one. He ended up losing 85 pounds. He finally passed.
So he was a gang person.
Oh,
right?
yeah. The gang unit broke into his house.
How did he end up at the Salvation Army?
Well, a gang unit broke into his house and they took his 6 kids away and he went to prison. And when he finally went up for parole, the judge said, you either go to Salvation Army or you go back to prison. And so he was great. These people scared me when I first started because of my background. But he ended up being amazing, and he lost 85 pounds. He finally passed his GED. He said he could not focus before this. He didn't understand the role that food played. Now, for him, the spiritual component was huge, massive. I mean, God in his life for him was a massive component. That was the big thing that he added. And then he said what surprised him, though, that didn't surprise him. What surprised him was that food made such a big difference. So the food for him, he didn't know would make a difference. He didn't understand that the brain fog, he thought he was stupid. He thought that he was dumb. And all of a sudden, he could think. His brain fog cleared and he passed his GED after the 3rd time. So he wrote me this amazing testimonial that I just, it was amazing. He said, my life was a mess and now it's a message. I've been tested and now I have a testimony. I was a victim and now I am victorious. I went through trials and now I am triumphant. And he ran up to me with his giant pants and gave me a big hug. And I have to tell you, it was a really weird moment for me.
So his giant pants that he didn't fit into anymore.
Right.
Because he lost 85 pounds, got his GED, completely transformed his life, and none of it
And he
was
did
hard.
a video with me on how to do this on a very, very rock bottom budget, and it's on YouTube. You can still find it. So it was really cool. And then another one was John. John said, he said, I have a 6-pack now, but the kind that won't get me arrested. So I just love that. So, I mean, he lost like, I don't know, 40 something pounds, but he said, I finally have a 6-pack, but it's the one that won't get me arrested. I just thought that was so cool. I mean, I had dozens of these testimonials.
So food matters.
So
if you want to rescue your brain, it starts by knowing your type and by loving your brain, but you got to get your food right.
So everything you put on the end of your fork matters because it affects your mood day to day. This is not just a long-term thing. It affects your mood day to day. It affects the moment to moment things you do. It affects your outlook. We talked a little bit about, food affects dopamine, whether or not you need more dopamine. It affects whether or not you need more serotonin. And we talk about this in great detail in the Brain Warriors Way cookbook about what to eat for, helping if you need to settle down your anxiety, what you need to do if you need to increase your focus. So all of those things are in there, but all of the recipes are designed to help the recovering brain. So you can go to to the website, TanaAmen.com, or if you're a member on BFL, you can go to BFL and all of the recipes are on there.
Brain Fit Life, mybrainfitlife.com.
Mybrainfitlife.com. You can get the book for, $20. You can get Brain Warriors Way cookbook, and it's got all of the herbs and spices, the recipes, why to do this, how to do this on a budget. It's got literally all these tips. And, people sometimes will say, well, you're selling your book. Yeah, I'm selling my book because for that amount of money.
That's why we write it. So
but the point is for that amount of money, you're getting an enormous amount of information to help you put your brain in a healing state. I really dumped my heart and soul into this book to help people with this specific topic. So I would just strongly suggest you do that. Cut out those most toxic foods first, the sugar, the white rice, the pasta, the potatoes. If you can, cut dairy back, at least the milk. And then, if it's yogurt or whatever, that's not quite as bad. Add those more, add more vegetables, the clean proteins, and see what happens. This is going to be amazing. But there are supplements that will help too. And I don't know if you want to do that in a separate podcast because this is long. I mean, there's a lot here, right? That's why we wrote the books we wrote. To help you with this.
Well, we hope people will stay with us for a long time.
And I could keep going on and on. So
stay with us. We will be back. You're listening to the Brain Warriors Way.